Polish teachers answer your questions. Lesson number 18. How does formal Polish work? How does formal Polish work?
And when is it used?
At PolishPod101.com, we hear these questions often. Imagine the following situation. Damian Dabrowski, a high school student, meets the mother of his neighbor friend, Karen Lee. He says, "Mrs. Lee, how are you?"
Jak się pani ma?
Listen to the full conversation.
Jak się pani ma?
Dobrze, dziękuję. A ty?
Once more with the English translation.
Jak się pani ma?
Mrs. Lee, how are you?
Dobrze, dziękuję. A ty?
Fine, thanks. And you? In this lesson, we'll be looking at how formal Polish works. Compared to English, Polish is quite formal, and, although it is slowly becoming less so, it's still important to know how to use formal language so you don't offend anyone by mistake. If you are in a casual, informal situation, perhaps with friends, family, or people of the same age, usually it'll not be necessary to use formal Polish. One uses formal language when talking to people who are older than you, or who have seniority or authority over you. For instance, when you are talking to your boss or to a stranger. These are both formal situations, and you would use the appropriate Polish. The dialogue for this lesson contains some formal Polish. I hope you noticed. Let's take a closer look at the dialogue. Do you remember how Damian Dabrowski says, "Mrs. Lee, how are you?"
Jak się pani ma?
In this situation, Damian is talking to the mother of a befriended neighbor. Because she is older, and also because she is the mother of his friend, he must address her formally. This is why he uses the word
Pani.
which translates to Mrs. or Madam in English. If Damian were talking to an older man or to a man in a position of authority or seniority over him, he would use the formal word.
Pan.
This word means sir in English. The greeting would then sound like this.
Jak się pan ma?
If addressing more than one person while using formal language, one should use the word
Państwo.
if you are talking to more than one person and the group is of mixed gender. This could be, for example, used if talking to a married couple,
Jak mogę państwu pomóc?
meaning, how can I help you? If it's a group of only men, one should address them by saying,
Panowie.
meaning misters, such as in,
Drodzy panowie.
literally, dear misters. And if it's a group consisting only of women, the right word to use is,
Panie.
meaning madames, as in,
Drogie panie.
meaning dear madames. A very common way to address mixed groups, for example, in formal speeches, is,
Drogie panie, drodzy panowie.
which can be translated as dear ladies and gentlemen. However, there is one additional word one can use to formally address a young unmarried woman. It is the equivalent of miss in English, and it sounds like this.
Panna.
You might hear it or read it somewhere, but we don't recommend you use it. These days, people in Poland don't really use it anymore, and it might make you sound old-fashioned. Sometimes it's even said in a mocking way, so it's best to avoid its use. Now, let's take a look at our second sentence. Do you remember how Karen Lee says, "Fine, thanks, and you?"
Dobrze, dziękuję. A ty?
Did you notice how Karen didn't use the Polish word for sir? If you recall, it sounds like this.
Pan.
Instead, she just used the informal word for you, which is this.
Ty.
This is because Damian is younger than her, and she doesn't need to use formal pronouns with him. In fact, it'd be weird if she did. In this lesson, we discussed which pronouns to use when talking to people in formal situations. We talked about the use of the Polish word for sir,
Pan.
and we talked about the Polish word for madam.
Pani.
These are both examples of formal Polish pronouns. We also looked at the informal word for you, which sounds like this.
Ty.
Let's consider another example using these words. If you meet an older person and want to ask, "Where do you live?" it'd be rude to ask them like this.
Gdzie mieszkasz?
Why? Well, this question is impolite, since it indicates the usage of the personal pronoun.
ty,
Instead of using that informal pronoun, if the person were an older woman, you would ask,
gdzie pani mieszka?
and if they were an older man, you would ask.
Gdzie pan mieszka?
As you can see, it's not terribly difficult to remember, but it is very important. When using Polish formal language, you should also consider the words that you choose. There are words that shouldn't be used in formal settings. For instance, slang words. Polish people might get offended if you use the word,
Wypas.
meaning super. Also, greeting someone using informal greetings, such as,
Cześć.
meaning hi, is very out of place when using formal language. If addressing someone who is considered of a high social status, even
Pan.
and
Pani.
might not be enough. In this case, it's very common to add the word,
Szanowny.
meaning respected, and add the occupation. This is especially true for formal emails and letters, especially in an academic environment. So, if you are writing an email to your academic instructor, you will write,
Szanowny panie profesorze.
when using spoken language, you will not need to add respected, but the rule about keeping the job title remains when addressing people with highly esteemed jobs or holding certain titles. So when talking to a medical doctor, you will address them saying,
Panie doktorze.
which can literally be translated as Mr. Doctor. When addressing someone this way, you will use the vocative case, which is why
Pan.
needs to be declined in the vocative case, and takes the form.
Panie.
Some jobs and titles that will require you to use this specific way of address are president,
Prezydent.
chairman,
Prezes.
professor or PhD,
Profesor. Doktor.
or a journalist, who will typically be addressed as,
Pan redaktor.
or if we are addressing a female journalist,
Pani redaktor.
literally meaning Mr. or Mrs. Editor. It is quite important to note that certain greetings in English, which might be almost rhetorical, are not this way in Polish. For instance, in English, if we asked, "How is it going?" we might not expect a detailed response from the other person. This kind of question, just like the question, "How are you?" is treated more like a formality than an actual inquiry about the person's well-being. It's different in Poland because in Polish, if you ask, "How is it going?"
Co słychać?
it's possible that you will get quite a lengthy response. You might also be expected to continue the conversation with more specific questions based on the information they have just given you. In other words, when you ask someone how they are in Polish, they are likely to take the question literally and answer you in detail. Do you have any more questions? We're here to answer them.
Do usłyszenia.
See you soon.